Professor Matt Forvdrup, thank you very much for joining us. We now move over to the Middle East, where the international community of the Red Cross has warned its humanitarian operations in Gaza could shut down within weeks if aid access isn't restored. In a statement, the ICRC said Israel's blockade is blocking food, medicine and critical supplies from reaching the war-ravaged enclave, home to 2.3 million people. The EU has echoed urgent calls to reopen aid corridors, demanding Israel lift its restrictions. Israel, which shut Gaza's crossings in March, insists aid is being exploited by Hamas. Aid groups counter that Israel's proposed military-led distribution violates international law and would worsen civilian suffering. Amnesty International has slammed the siege, calling starvation a war crime, and the WHO describes the Gaza crisis as catastrophic. The US, Israel are reportedly close to a deal to bypass humanitarian in aid distribution. Meanwhile, Gaza's Civil Defense Agency said that an overnight Israeli strike on the Khan Yunis refugee camp killed at least 11 people, including 3 babies up to a year old. We are now joined by Nasser Mashni, President of the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network, located in Melbourne. Thank you very much, Nasser, for joining us. We've heard about this blockade for the past 2 months. The humanitarian aid that's sent by various agencies is being blocked by Israel. Israel, of course, citing Hamas as being the reasons to prevent that aid from going in. They claim that Hamas loots the aid. I would just want you to talk to me, Nasser, about the effect that this blockade is having directly on the lives of Palestinians.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Thomas. And I think very first thing we need to do is to completely, throw in the bin anything Israel says. It's beyond apparent now to everyone in the world that Israel lies every time they open their mouth. And that comes from the manufacturing of the consent for this genocide way back when, 18 months ago, 575 days ago, when they said there were 40 beheaded babies. There were systematic rapes. All of the lies that Israel said have been disproved. Today, what we've got is a situation where Israel says that aid is controlled by Hamas and Hamas is using it. It's just another lie. The lies are used to justify this genocide, justify the killing, the imprisonment, the hostage taking of the Palestinians. We talk about hostages. There are 2 million hostages in Gaza that are absolutely captive to this barbaric, racist, genocidal state. So what we really need to be talking about is how we hold Israel to account. There is enough aid now at the Egyptian border to feed Gaza for 3 months, and Israel's not letting it in. It's not letting it in because they want to continue the settler colonialist ideology that started in 1948, where they wanted all of the Palestinian land with no Palestinian people. The plan here is to make Gaza unlivable so that Gazans, Palestinians, are ethnically cleansed from their lands. What does it look like today? I saw images this morning of some emaciated children who have died of starvation. It's not just Amnesty International, but it's every human rights organisation. It's the United Nations that are charging Israel with using food as a weapon of war. It's a war crime. What should be happening is countries like India and all over the world should be holding Israel to account. We should be boycotting that country, we should sanction it, and we should be divesting from it. It must be held to account. You can't kill 2 million people like Israel is planning to do. Exterminating 2 million people like Israel is planning to, and just not be held to account. It's shameful.
Yes, and Nasser, the ICRC says operations could shut down in weeks if this blockade continues. What happens to hospitals and aid depots if that happens?
Well, there isn't a functioning hospital, Thomas. There isn't a functioning hospital. We saw a couple of weeks ago, Israel telephoned the operating room and said, you've got 20 minutes to clear the last functioning hospital emergency room in Rafah. and they bombed that room. The child that was being operated on ended up passing away in the street on a gurney. The hospitals aren't working. There is no school. No child has been to school in 18 months. Women have been giving birth with no pain relief. Cesarean sections being done on women with no pain relief. Children having limbs amputated and being given Panadol or Panadine, pills. This is just abhorrent that we're talking about this, that, 2+ million people are being held captive. And that is just a microcosm of the actual situation in the whole of historic Palestine. Nobody's talking about what's happening in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, inside 48 Palestine. And Thomas, earlier on, you were talking about Israel bombing Syria in a move to let the Syrian regime know that they need to protect the Druze. Israel wouldn't care 2 cents about the Druze in Syria. It's all about exerting their regional hegemony and making sure everybody understands who's the big guy in town. It's shameful.
Nasser, Hamas is designated a terrorist organization by many countries around the world. How do you respond to critics who say the focus should be on removing Hamas before humanitarian aid is allowed to flow freely into Gaza?
Oh, it's just an absolute furphy, and it's a distraction from the real present crimes that Israel's committing. Number one, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and Israel is running rampant there. They've ethnically cleansed the Janin refugee camp. They're in Tulkarm. The experience of a Palestinian citizen of this apartheid state in Israel is beyond imagining what that's like, and they talk about it being the only democracy in the Middle East. This has nothing to do with Hamas. This is about Israel extending its settler colonialist regime. They've always wanted as much Palestinian geography as possible with as little Palestinian demography. This is about land. It's about the resources of Gaza. It's about having all of Gaza with no Palestinians. When people talk about Hamas, what we should be talking about is the International Court of Justice ruling in January of last year that Israel was plausibly committing a genocide. And the 15 months since then, where Israel has rained unchecked 2,000-ton bombs on tent cities, killed over 200 of your fellow reporters, Thomas, over 200, close to 800 medical workers. 3 weeks ago, we saw the vision from a martyred Palestinian ambulance worker when they recovered his body, where he'd been videotaping the assassination of himself and his 14 co-workers before Israel buried those ambulances and those workers in a mass grave. They said that didn't happen. They said they were all Hamas, and then they said they'd investigate. Then they called us all anti-Semites for suggesting anything might be wrong with that whole investigation. And then they came clean and said, it was an operational error. We can't be believing Israel. This is a regime that continues to lie, to genocide and kill Palestinians.
Nasser Mashni, thank you very much for your insight. We stay in the Middle East now, where sirens have sounded in Jerusalem and southern Israel this morning after Yemen's Houthi rebels fired a ballistic missile towards the country. The Israel Defense Forces successfully intercepted the missile. So far, there have been no reports of injuries or damage. This latest attack is part of a recent escalation, with the Houthi group claiming responsibility for several missile and drone attacks over the past few days. The Israeli military has responded with air defense systems, but the Houthi rebels, who have continued to target Israel and have vowed to keep challenging Israel's security. The situation remains tense as the Houthis recently called for more attacks on Israel while they continue to defend their territory and their civilians. We are